As we have learned in many types of fiction, anything can be turned into a weapon, including words if you ask Phoenix Wright. So let me introduce you to one of the deadliest weapons I've come across in fiction. Roses. No, not those, the first image was correct. For some reason, while you could and likely should view a rose as a lovely flower to wear, decorate, or give as a gift, forget all those appearance-based uses and keep away from children since apparently they are the most dangerous of weapons.
What are you talking about? I don't want a deadly rose for prom. I just want a regular rose for prom. Like, the one that smells nice and pretty.
You're 24. You haven't had to worry about the prom in how many years now?
I always have to worry about prom. Always.
In this video, we'll see how roses have been weaponized in fiction to be things like swords or one of the more popular weapons, whips. I'm not sure why, but rose whips appear a lot, so expect some of those in this video. The only credentials for this list are the rose has to be used as a weapon in some manner. But the more practical and more varied the flower is, the higher the choice, like ones that are swords or spray poison.
What about a sword that sprays poison?
Then those get extra points. If a rose is part of a character's anatomy and can form weapons, those count too. Last, if a rose weapon is more mechanical than organic rose, it does not get as many imaginary points as roses implied to be natural on this list. Well, these credentials sound kinda goofy and picky when you say them out loud. Finally, apologies for the sound quality of my co-host person's mic here, since it was supposed to be a rose to keep with the theme, but we couldn't find one, so we had to settle with making her mic a daisy.
We didn't have any good botanists here.
Quite tragic, really.
Just had to go to the local drugstore.
Anyway, here are our top 10 characters that fight with roses, or use roses as a weapon. I liked both titles. Number 10. Tuxedo Mask from Sailor Moon. Remember that time Sailor Moon was in trouble fighting some creature, and then Tuxedo Mask threw a rose at it?
Which episode?
The one that had a monster of the day in it.
Oh, you mean every episode?
The rose usually hits the villain, and then everyone stops since throwing the rose hurts. I mean, it's hardly lethal, it's more like throwing a baseball at someone. It hurts, but you kinda just wince for a second and then continue what you were doing. He generally just throws one, then gives some generic words of encouragement before leaving. So, yeah. We really have nothing else to say about his rose throwing skills.
That's because he doesn't do anything.
What do you mean? He's got a great plan. Step 1, throw a rose to stop the fight. Step 2, say some motivational words. And Step 3, leave before the fight starts. Alternatively, Step 3 can be he stays and does non-rose things, usually not being the one to save the day. That's a bit misleading since that was mostly seen in the first season of the original anime. His rose is really just meant to be a reset button for the fight and part of his entrance. He later gained useful attacks, like his smoker bomb thing attack. Number 9. Harpie Lady from Yu-Gi-Oh! When in doubt, look to Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards when finding any type of character you need. And here we have our first rose whip of the list with the Harpie Lady. A rose whip is basically an elongated stem of a rose that allows it to be cracked like a normal whip. In the anime, Mai would summon the Harpie Lady and equip the spell card Rose Whip to raise the attack of her. Rose petals would fly everywhere and it's all pretty-like. It destroys all monsters that stand in its way, except those stronger than the Harpie Lady and certain effect monsters, but it gets messy when you go beyond that territory. However, the Rose Whip does not actually exist, because it was never integrated into the real card game after showing up in the anime, despite how easy it would be to make a card like this, but I guess that just makes the Rose Whip a rare commodity. All it does is raise Harpie Lady's attack points by 300. Though the Rose Whip does live on the rarely used in real life card, Harpie Lady Sisters. Don't think you could hide from me in the hands of the main Harpie Lady Rose Whip. Of course they don't give it to the subjectively best Harpie Lady, the orange hair. Number 8. Ruby Rose from Ruby. Okay, so she has a big rose-themed name, and her weapon is known as the Crescent Rose. She's gotta have big roses involved with her attacks, right? How does this Crescent Rose work?
The scythe turns into a gun, and into other things, and then roses just spill out of it.
Quite the in-depth description. So do the rose petals hurt you to fit with this topic?
I don't think they really hurt you. I think they're just pretty.
So the name Crescent Rose lies to me. It's not a rose at all. Well, I guess that lowers its spot on this list, but Ruby is mostly here because of how much the rose aesthetics signify her power. When she shoots enemies, rose petals explode out of where the bullets made contact, so I guess she makes your injuries pretty. And when she activates her semblance, which makes her faster, rose petals form behind her. So while the roses in her attacks are not as painful as the roses other characters on this list use, I'll give her credit for having her cosmetic roses be so involved in a lot of her fighting abilities, as opposed to just poses like what we see from other fighters that aren't on this list, like the Ginyu Force. Don't worry, you're still the man, Ginyu. Number 7. Raphael from Soul Calibur. Specifically his joke weapon from Soul Calibur 4 and 5, which was a long rose that functions as a sword called My Beloved. Now he looks ready for some Shakespeare with his rose fighting abilities, especially considering the latest Soul Calibur is set in 1607. A rose by any other name. I forget the rest.
Would smell is sweet. Finish the sentence.
For this segment, I wanted to get the rose sword in action, which means I will have to switch to the toaster cam for this bit, so that's what's up with the video quality here. I also dressed Raphael like James from Pokemon since it was fitting. Every character in Soul Calibur has a joke weapon, which ranged in how silly they were and how much they fit the character. Raphael's is pretty fitting. In Soul Calibur 5, the joke weapons dealt equal amounts of damage as the regular weapons, so they were purely cosmetic. That means this rose is as harmful as a fencing sword. That's one strong flower. This is a fitting sword since his critical edge, or super move, always ends with rose petals floating in the air, so when using the rose sword, it shows they merely did not just form out of thin air. Considering he hits his opponents with mostly the edge of his sword, it could be argued that the stem of this flower is stronger than the petals, but analyzing that at all would be looking for meaning where there is none. Now, if they gave the rose sword an explanation like that it was grown in a garden that caused it to have a sharp stem or something, it may have gotten a higher ranking on this list, but the developers rightfully had lots more priorities than that. Number 6. George Desand from G Gundam. He has a Gundam called Gundam Rose. He truly embraces his love of roses, which just happen to be rose laser bombs. Rose streamers, to use the correct name. He also carries around a real rose for style and dramatic effect, so he gets to show off his favorite flower in battle and recreation. He could have just chosen a Gundam with normal lasers or normal bombs, but no! His love of roses affected his arsenal. You would think with giant space rose missiles or lasers he would get higher on the list, but the fact that these roses are robotic drops him down a few spots.
It's not his fault that he can't find laser roses in nature. You don't grow those in your backyard.
It's also reasonable since I don't expect real roses to survive in the vacuum of space, even with laser firing capabilities. Number 5. Poison Ivy from Batman. So for a Batman villain that uses plants as their main form of offense, defense, and trickery, there's bound to be a rose or two in there somewhere, right? Well, first off, just look at any piece of promotional artwork with her and there's a compendium of plant life. Just find a rose in there. However, more specifically, her first appearance in Batman, the animated series, where not only was it a main motivation of hers to save a rare rose, but also she extracts the juices from it to make a poisonous serum. She may not turn it into a whip, but she gets the job done. However, if you want a more physical approach, there was one comic where she used her plant powers to telepathically connect with Zatanna's rose plant, grab a hold of Zatanna, and then ask her for help. Yes, it's not a brutal display of rose-themed attacks, but it was an aggressive way to ask civil questions, which further proves that even with such a calm yet startling method of communication, we can all have the notion that words hurt. Number 4. Dudley from Street Fighter. Dudley's taunt in Street Fighter 3 involved him turning his back and throwing a rose in the air quite elegantly. It can also count as an attack since it does make contact. In Street Fighter 4, it deals the minimum damage. However, when it was introduced in Street Fighter 3, it did not deal damage, but the opponent would react like it was quite the nuisance. Also, it increases Dudley's damage after performed in Street Fighter 3, so not only is it painful on its own, sort of, but it makes Dudley more painful. Of course, with Dudley not on the Street Fighter V roster or in its first round of DLC, Capcom felt we still needed an insidious Rose attack. So what obvious Street Fighter character made sense to inherit such a move?
Ooh! Is it Rose? Oh no, you're making it. It sounds like Scooby-Doo.
Indeed, it is everyone's favorite man with a claw, Vega.
I don't like that. I'm scary.
What's to hate about Vega throwing a rose now? Vega's V trigger in Street Fighter V allows him to perform Bloody Kiss, where he throws a rose at a high speed, and if it connects, he performs some claw slashes, so the rose attack is more of a means to an end for a different attack. If Dudley ever makes the game, he can show Vega proper rose throwing techniques. Still, doesn't this make Vega much more friendly looking?
I don't think he's lovable and huggable. Did you see the claws? The claws, that doesn't make him huggable at all. Would you want to be hugged with the claws that he has?
What's despicable and creepy about Vega, besides him jumping around the stage in an attempt to cut you, laughing maniacally as he does his super move, his Street Fighter V win pose, taking 25 years to put on a shirt as his primary outfit, licking his mask as he takes it off, and in the Street Fighter II anime movie, stalking Chun-Li in her own home as she takes a shower in an attempt to slowly kill her as he tastes her own blood that got splattered on his claw. Explain why I should avoid him after knowing all that.
Did you see him? Did you see him stalk Chun-Li in the shower? She just got all clean and all washed up, and then he got her all dirty with her blood, and then she had to get cleaned up all over again.
That was a well-articulated response. Plus, didn't Chun-Li get her revenge in that movie by kicking Vega through a wall that was definitely not on the first floor of a building?
Yeah, she did.
Number 3. Roselia from Pokemon. As Marvel's Iron Fist has taught us, one's fists can be considered a weapon. And considering Roselia's fists are 2 roses the size of hands, based on proportions, her fists are pretty dangerous when used correctly.
How can she eat like that? How does she hold a fork?
Well, if we go by the handy-dandy Pokedex, we'll see it mostly drinks spring water, so it probably does not need to worry about holding food. Then again, like half the entries in the Pokedex are based off theories, so maybe Roselia enjoys a good meatloaf every once in a while. But what makes these fists deadly weapons are all the poisons and plant-themed weapons hiding inside of them. Apparently, it has different poisons hiding in each hand, so probably something like red for the deadly poisons and blue for the painful poisons? This is bolstered by it having the ability Poison Point, which poisons the opponent on contact. Do you at least think I could pick these flowers? The more dastardly part of these flowers is they emit a delightful aroma, so they lure you in near them and then death. In the anime, many of its attacks are seen coming from its rose fists, my favorite being Solar Beam. And for those who wonder why Roselia over its evolution Roserade, it's really just because I like the design of the rose hands over the bouquet hands of Roserade. Sometimes less is more, but not always. Number 2. Rosemon from Digimon. So while Roselia utilizes moves uniquely with its rose hands that many other grass-type Pokemon can use, some of which have nothing to do with roses, Rosemon employs its own unique rose-themed attacks that are not only exclusive to its character, but also she finds every possible way to use all of the rose to her advantage. Before even going into her attacks, you can tell by just looking at her that she embraces this theme from head to toe to soul. It's probably mostly what she thinks about too, since, based on how much of her head is engulfed by that rose, I'd also have roses on the brain.
She can't see it, does she? See, she has petals in her eyes and Mistburn.
Rosemon is the Mega Digivolution of Palmon, and Mega is as high as it gets, so forget its ultimate form Lilymon. We're at the max peak of Rose weaponry here. Its design is fit for a Rose wielder, and her rosy arsenal is no secret as she carries her Mega Rose Whip out in the open. We don't even need to wait for it to attack to guess what kind of attacks it will use.
Do you see how the petals form a cape? That's so clever.
But enough about praising her style. She utilizes her floral anatomy well with a cornucopia of attacks. Also rose lasers. She has rose lasers. So she kinda one-ups George DeSand in this case. Anyway, she can destroy Digimon with rose petals. Yeah, those parts of the rose that we typically see for decoration, they're even lethal in attacks. Upgrade that to a rosy cradle, which puts opponents to sleep if they're too strong to simply fall to petals. She also has weapons that we see here, like her Rose Whip, that can be electrified to one-up the Harpie Lady. Then there's also Rosemon's Burst Mode. The size of that whip says this character is done playing. Of all the characters on this list, Rosemon is the one that took the Rose theme as far as she could. My attacks are Rose, my outfit is Rose, my face is Rose, my name is Rose, my scent is Rose, probably. Number 1. For number 1, we chose a character that makes the most out of a single rose. He is not part rose, but he goes all organic with his flowers. Plus, he's probably the character on this list that has the most fangirls. Kurama from Yu Yu Hakusho. Kurama's main tool is the rose. He always has one handy that he can transform into a powerful weapon with one fast hand motion and one sound effect. Whoosh!
He pulls it out from his gorgeous flowing hair.
Kurama might be regarded as the prettiest character in this show. So all the
He is!
Alright, no more swooning, I'll take over the rest of this segment. His main weapon he turns the rose into is the Rose Whip, which has different uses. It can power through stone, demons, and really anything that stands in his way. While he cannot kill every enemy in one whiplash, it's how versatile this weapon is. It has different forms that make it more powerful, or he can use it as a shield with it rotating around him. His adeptness with the whip itself allows it to be handy when you would not expect it to be relevant. Like when he was unable to move his body outside of his head, he planted the rose seed in his hair and used his talent of accelerating the growth of plants, even in environments where they are not meant to thrive, to create a rose whip that he manipulates with his hair. There was also that time he used it to surprise his rival by hanging from the ceiling like a certain spider-themed superhero. However, he uses more than just the whip. While the Rose Whip is his signature weapon, if he's feeling lazy, he can just throw the rose as a weapon itself. That method still impales pretty painfully. He can also make the petals and thorns dangerous on their own if he feels like making a pretty, yet dramatic, yet deadly entrance. There's much more plant manipulation in his arsenal, but the rose is by far his most practical plant. He gained all these powers from the fox spirit Yoko, whose soul resides in his body after the spirit jumped in Kurama's body as a baby to hide from enemies. So I guess you could say Kurama's a fox? Yeah, he is. Anyway, with the most creative use for a rose whip and some proficient ways of turning a simple flower into a Swiss Army knife, Kurama takes the top spot of rose-wielding characters in any form of media on this list. So what do you think? Agree? Disagree? Are there any characters that use rose weapons that we left off this list? Let us know. Every time we have an esoteric topic like this, people always show us that it's not as exclusive as we think. Anyway, thank you all for watching, see you in the next video, and for those of you who like some content after the main video, here are some random outtakes and bloopers. Roll 'em! Let me introduce you to the mighty and deadly Rose.
They're not any worse than a paper cut. What can they really do? Smell nice. Triplets are the way to go.
A main weapon of Rosemon is the Rose Whip.
Just like the other character we just talked about.
But technically this will be earlier in the list.
Oh, whoopsie.
So maybe Rosalina enjoys a good meatloaf and glass of chocolate milk once in a while, said Rosalina. Well, maybe she enjoys those things too. How's your milk, Rosalina?
I don't have any chocolate milk today, but I do have mango chai tea.
And that's all we have on Kurama. She's laughing at me.